Our next guest speaker, I'm going to welcome to the stage, is Patty Ferguson-Bohnee. She is director of the Indian Legal Clinic at the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law, and she's also member and attorney for the Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe. Is anyone else getting an echo? No? All right.
Hopefully that will
fun fact, actually a couple of fun facts about Patty. Kind of funny. She wrote to me and said, Emily, I don't have anything fun to tell about myself. I'm actually kind of boring. And I read her fun facts and I said, no, that's not true. So not only does she know how to make palmetto baskets, which she learned how to cut and process the palmetto herself, and actually worked with some of the elders from Ile-de-Jean Charles, who taught her how to weave them into the baskets. She also studied in France a few times. First a semester as an undergrad, a year after college doing research, and then again for a semester during law school. She lived with a family who owned a bakery, and she got to eat a lot of great food. And during her studies, she also played basketball on 2 French college teams. So she's an attorney who can weave her own baskets out of native plants and, yeah, speak French. So I'd like to welcome to the stage our next guest speaker, Patty Ferguson-Bohnee.
Hi, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate being able to participate, and thank you, Chip, for the segue. What I think I'd like to do is just provide some context and background of our community and tribe, the Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe, discuss the BP oil spill and the impact on our community, as well as our engagement in the response efforts, and then share a little bit about what we're trying to do to protect our community, our cultural heritage, despite many of the challenges that we face. Just so people know, the Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe is an unrecognized tribe located in Lafourche and Terrebonne parishes, the southern end of the parishes in Louisiana. And we've been there since time immemorial. And our landscape has undergone significant changes in the past 100 years. What you're looking at right now is a picture of Pointe-au-Chien in the 1930s. As you can see, the land is very lush and fertile. The Mississippi River topsoil replenished the earth every year, created new land. The barrier islands protected us from storms, and we had materials for everything we needed: homes, medicine, water, food. We actually had large agricultural areas. We fished, hunted. And I just want to note that if you look at this house, it's a palmetto house and it's on the ground. And my mom, when she grew up, when she was born, she lived in one of these houses, and she was born in the late 1940s. And I also want you to note the large number of trees that we had. And so I just want to share, this is just another type of house that we had around the 1930s and 40s. It's a mud house, mud and moss house with palmetto. And this is the land loss map, kind of building on what Emily shared with us earlier, the great losses from 1930s to 2010, which is even more now. And, you know, over the years, we've had to adapt to this environment. Our barrier islands have disappeared. Saltwater intrusion has ended most of the farming and cattle. Our houses are raised. And this area is one of the fastest eroding areas in the United States. So this Terrebonne Basin, which is home to us, but also to Ile-de-Jean Charles. And this is another example of the map where you can see the red showing the land loss, but it's really created significant challenges for us as a community in the last 100 years. It's really threatened our continued survival and our culture. We used to live further down the bayou near all these lakes where you can see from the outline but it's already resulted in relocation from a number of villages that people lived in because the water is not drinkable, the crops can't grow, the animals don't have fresh water. So it really impacts self-sufficiency. So with the loss of the barrier islands, the rerouting of the Mississippi River, and the number of haphazard cuts in the land by oil and gas, our region has undergone tremendous change, resulting in land loss and increased vulnerability to environmental disasters. And all of these are compounded by sea level rise. And it's really a lot of value judgments have been made about what's important, whose culture is important. And, you know, just from my perspective, that hasn't been tribal communities. But one of the big issues for our community is that we're not federally recognized. And so that's really been an impediment in exercising our rights to self-determination and trying to protect our land, and also in trying to protect our cultural heritage. And so I think it would be helpful for people, especially those who aren't from Louisiana, to kind of see the community now, to give you a little perspective.
Nice grab. My name is Donald Dardar, and I'm from Pointe-au-Chien. I guess it's in the blood because my dad did it, his dad before him did it. I guess that their dad before them, they just followed the tradition. Yeah, when it first started, we didn't have no license back then, we just went crabbing it. But it was a line, you'd set a beat, I guess every 6 foot on the line, and you'd have a little hand net, and the line would just follow the side of the boat, and you just pick the crabs, catch them. A lot more water now than what we had when I was growing up. We had so many trees behind my house or whatever. I could get lost in the trees. But now it's a lot different because we used to have islands that's all going now. Years back, you had a lot more protection.
So I guess the reason why we got together is because last week the government finally issued new rules on the federal recognition process. All of the changes that people wanted were not made, but there are significant differences, I think, that will help our petition.
They said in 50 years this is completely gone, so. And I could believe them because if they don't do nothing on the outside or on the islands to try and build it with some kind of protection, it's going to go. It's going to wash away. For me, it's the best place for me to live anyway. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but my house is right across the street, and I walk right to the bayou side and get in my boat and go to work. I don't think somebody could ask for anything better than that. Our community is maybe like 1.5 miles long. On the other side of the bayou, it's all Native American people and American Indians.
That's a big crab right there, huh?
If you ask who Donald Dardar is, at the last house on this end or the first house on this end, they know who he is. I know everybody that lives down the road. But we're all family. Everybody's family.
So I wanted to share that because, I mean, I hope it gives you a little bit of feeling of Pointe-au-Chien and our community and why we're still so passionate about maintaining our community and our culture. And I just want to note that, you know, there's been a lot of harm in the recent, you know, past several decades. And in 2005 and 2008, those are examples of that harm with Katrina and Rita. And in both of those, there was wind damage, but there was 8 feet of water that came into the community. And I just want to reference that because in 2010, we had the BP oil spill. And whenever that happened, our community was still rebuilding from the effects of the 2008 hurricane. So people hadn't finished restoring their homes. People were trying to raise their homes, and we don't have a levee. And at that time, the levee wasn't finished. It's still not finished, but there was no levee protecting our community. But there's levees on the east and west side, which creates like also this funneling effect sometimes. But since there weren't any levees or anything like that, in addition to our village sites further down and fishing sites, there was a concern that there could be increased risk not only to fisheries and cultural and sacred sites, but displacement if there was a tropical disturbance after the BP oil spill that would bring oil contamination into the community where people live. So that was very challenging. And then people were rebuilding, and at the time that they were rebuilding, our community fishes, and you know, so when the oil spill occurred, the fishing season, the shrimp season was closed, and there wasn't any consultation with the fishermen where there wasn't oil. And what our communities do is like they fish commercially, but they also fish and share it with other people in the community, and put it up so that they have seafood for times when they can't fish. And so that wasn't able to occur. And when you close down the fisheries or any forms of sharing those natural resources, that also impacts the social and cultural fabric of the community, because people aren't able to share those foods. They don't have the same resources to, you know, buy expensive meat at the store. And then one elder told me that she didn't even like it. It didn't even, you know, didn't even taste good to her. So I just think it's important to frame that, like what was going on in the community when this happened. So when the governor's office declared a state of emergency at the end of April, it instituted a response under the Louisiana Emergency Operating Plan. And under that plan, Indian tribes are recognized as independent entities under their own control, and that they should deal with federal, state, and parish and governmental bodies, and that the Governor's Office of Indian Affairs is responsible for coordinating with tribes for these responses. But at this time, and for a number of years, there was no director for that Governor's Office of Indian Affairs. So there was no coordination. There was actually no state or local officials who came to Pointe-au-Chien to meet with tribal leaders, despite repeated requests, until after July 2010. So obviously the tribe had a lot of concerns about protecting the community, our sacred sites, our hunting and fishing, the impact on wildlife, on our medicinal plants, what this could mean for land loss or just the whole community if there was a flood or a disturbance in the Gulf that could bring some oil in. Oil reached Pointe-au-Chien on around May 23rd, and the council voted to actively participate in the protection of our historic, cultural, and natural resources. And we requested assistance from the Unified Command, and the incident commander directed BP to work with the tribe to respond to the oil spill. And we specifically asked for materials and resources necessary to protect our cultural and historic properties, to protect our current village site from low-level tropical threats, assist the tribe to gain an independent and unbiased assessment of our cultural and historical sites that can be protected from disclosure under Section 106, and develop an evacuation plan or relocation plan in case there was oil that was brought in through a disturbance. So by about May 26th, we had a staging area that was opened in Lower Pointe-au-Chien that was coordinated through our tribal chairman and the chief of the Ile-Jean-Charles Indian community. And we were employing tribal members, or they were employing tribal members to assist in the protection of the community. So this is one of our tribal members who participated, and I think it was important because they felt like they were able to help the community and also try to protect the community and sacred sites from these threats. We had tribal members who also did a lot of work on data collection. There were a number of animals that were impacted. There were a lot of birds that were found on one island that were impacted by the oil spill, sea turtles that were impacted. And so the tribe did a lot documenting that and obtaining water samples. So that was something that we worked on. As you can see here, there's oil that's in our community. And so we're really obviously concerned about that. And Chip talked about Section 106. And under Section 106, federally recognized tribes are automatically consulting parties. And we weren't necessarily, but thanks to Chip and the state, they did ensure that the impacted tribes were invited to initial discussions about traditional cultural properties. But not being federal recognized actually was a challenge from the beginning, because I just want to note, none of the tribes on the coast who were directly impacted are federally recognized. So that's a challenge. And so no tribes met the trustee status under NERDA or the Oil Pollution Act to engage directly. And so that was unfortunate. So all the work had to be done through the state with the federal partners, but it didn't mean that the federal partners couldn't work directly with the tribes. They just were choosing not to in some instances. And so unfortunately, there were other tribes from other states that came into Louisiana who I think kind of impeded our ability to participate, to where, although we were participating in stakeholder meetings, there were some meetings that occurred where we were excluded. So we had to request formal participation, which was eventually granted. Our tribal monitor was also participating, and the federal tribes were not happy with that. So that did not last. But I just thought that was very unfortunate, because there were a number of human remains that were found, and the folks some of the tribes who were working on it knew that we were ancestors. Those were our ancestors, and they didn't tell us, like we didn't know, but the landowner knew, and he contacted the tribe and invited the elders out. So that was, that's just very heartbreaking for the tribal community to have like your ancestors being moved and removed and not knowing about that. And the reason for that is because we weren't, federally recognized and how that interacted. So that was unfortunate. We also tried to participate in NERDA, but we weren't able to because we weren't federally recognized. So we asked the state if they would designate us a local official, but the governor never responded to the request. And, documenting our sites was something, an ongoing thing that we wanted to work on that hadn't been achieved prior to BP. BP said that they were going to allocate additional funds to work on that with us, but they didn't. And obviously these oiled areas were not subject to remediation because of potential damage. I will just note in the remaining time that I have that we did work very actively, however, on Subsistence. And when the lawyer from BP was in our community after the staging area was over, he said, we're never going to pay Subsistence in the lower 48, but our tribe, along with other communities, worked really hard on Subsistence. We did a lot of interviews and worked with other communities. One of our other lawyers worked on this framework to advocate for this. So then in the end, like everyone involved in the BP process who qualified could apply for Subsistence, which I think is really important because especially for us, it's part of our everyday life and our social interaction. And, you know, that really had an impact on the community, not having those resources. So I just want to mention that because it is within the law, but there was a lot of opposition to be able to providing that to the lower 48. And I want to just talk about some things that we've been working on, because moving forward, we have to think, you know, how are we going to protect our community and the environment that we're in? And we have elevated homes. We're working on community gardens outside of the community. We've worked on a bulkhead safe harbor project, oyster stabilization project to protect some of our mounds. There's now a floodgate, and we're the last link in the levee for the Merganza to the Gulf to where our community currently lives, the village site. And so that'll be done in a couple of years. And the levee boards have agreed to some temporary measures because of flooding that we got last year. And this is a picture of our second chairman and our community garden that's available to everyone. And I just want to show this. This is our community building, but also to the side on the left is a raised medicinal garden that we we've built it, but we're in the process of finishing it up. And I just want to note that, you know, with the BP oil spill and the work that we did, we really looked at, you know, we have these ongoing challenges and we need to really focus on how do we protect our communities and our culture and our heritage moving forward. And we've been working a lot on traditional archaeological knowledge, documenting our sacred sites. A lot of work was done through the BP oil spill and through an assessment for some sacred sites. And so our tribe will be working on preparing a national register application that includes a whole landscape with our traditional areas. And of course, we're going to continue to work on federal recognition and language preservation. So these are some of the horses that are in Pointe-au-Chien, and you could just, you know, see them when you're going up and down the bayou. It's very interesting. And I just want to thank y'all for the opportunity to participate. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing about your community and about that perspective, Patty.